Okay, for my refutation speech, I am refuting Devin's argument, which was the foster care system is a system full of abuse and neglect. Her first secondary claim is that foster youth suffer emotional and sexual abuse. Her second secondary claim is that because of abuse, former foster youth are unprepared for life on their own, and that because of abuse, children in the foster care system lack education. For my refutation, my advocate's claim isn't really controversy. Wherever you look, the state system is very flawed. So it kind of lacked a thing for me to argue about, but the main claim isn't a simple declarative sentences. It gives 2 points to argue about, and she does point out how it's filled with abuse, but she doesn't really support anything for neglect. For her evidence, she had all of the first one, sexual abuse, and for the evidence in her first claim, there was one that was the rate of sexual abuse within the foster care system is more than 4 times as high as in the general population. And this article is information from an article by Robert Thoma that was written in 2005, and the study that it was taken from was from 1992. I thought that maybe we could find some more recent information that it wasn't as high as she had claimed. And that for the second and third claims, she said that 51% are unemployed, 31% receive public assistance, and 50% become homeless during their first 2 years exiting foster care. And for her third claim, she put 54% earn high school diplomas and 2% earn a bachelor's degree. Both were from 2004 to 2005 and are still relatively old, and looking at newer data, it's not quite as high as it used to be. It's a little bit better now. It also focuses more on the state system is more flawed. Some of her data comes from private foster care systems. One of the quotes is from Angels Foster Care, which is actually promoting its own private foster care, and there's evidence that proves that private foster care is not quite as flawed as the state foster care system, which I think is what she was focusing more on.
All right, well, the presentation things are pretty solid. You do a nice job talking to the audience. You signpost ideas pretty clearly. And for most of the presentation, you also give us fairly good declarative statements on some of the issues. There were a couple of places where I didn't think that you explained clearly what the impact of what you were talking about was. For instance, on that last point about the difference between the private and the public foster care systems, it wasn't clear to me if the advocate had used a private foster care system and then was trying to generalize about the public foster care system from that, in which case they're using an inappropriate sample to reach that generalization, or if you were arguing that private foster care is superior and she's largely ignored that, and that might in fact be a substantial part of what foster care is going on, and so the results are going to be different, so her reasoning is wrong for a different explanation. It could be either of those things, and I wasn't quite sure on that. I did understand the point that you were making about the difference between the two systems, but I didn't really understand what conclusion or what inference you wanted to draw from that. On the point about the studies, one of them you criticized for being almost 20 years old, and I think that's a reasonable challenge. On the next one, you do say that there's been a change in the last few years in the data, but you don't tell us what that change is. I think you need to make a stronger argument about this not really being a conflict here, that everybody can agree that there are problems in the foster care system. The question is, what are the causes of the problems in the foster care system? I think that might be a good way to maybe try and find where the dispute is on this argument. Is the problem because the foster care system is inadequate, or is it because of the kids or the people who end up in the foster care system that create the problem? I mean, it could be both directions. Maybe the people that provide the foster care are not well regulated, they aren't screened well, they aren't, there's no checking on them, and so abuse occurs. Or maybe it's because kids are coming from problem situations and they're problem kids, and they bring their problems with them into the foster care system, and that's part of the issue that's going on there. And of course, then they come in contact with kids who aren't, part of the problem. They're like, I think Devin's example was a personal experience, wasn't it? That her mother just got sick and died, and they were all by themselves, and she ended up in foster care system. So it's not that she was a problem person, but guess what she ends up with? She ends up with a foster care family that's got 2 or 3 kids that have, they came from a home where there was drug abuse and sexual abuse and physical abuse and neglect, that kind of thing. And now those kids who are damaged are in with her, and then there are potential problems. Is it the kids that are causing the problem, or is it the system? I think there's some good questions that you could ask that would kind of press where the conflict is on this, and then maybe we could find a little bit more argument on it. I appreciate the difficulty that you were put in, because it does sound like it's really a descriptive kind of presentation rather than an inferential presentation. All right, thank you.